news, obviously, today. Vice President and presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris has chosen Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. How do you think this choice will help her support in those key battleground Midwestern states? And was this move ultimately influenced by Trump's selection of another Midwesterner in J.D. Vance?
You know, I think this was a selection that's based on Kamala Harris's own basic comfort level. I think she was not comfortable with Josh Shapiro or others, mainly because he would have upset the very much pro-Hamas base of the Democratic Party, the side of the Democratic Party that still has ties to Israel, which her base would not really support. Also, I believe there was a discussion of Harris's inability to campaign as well as, say, a Shapiro or others. Walz is a folksy guy, served with him in Congress. He'll give the plain-spoken kind of rhetoric, but she went to another liberal that's as liberal as herself in a blue state. I think that was really a telling move here. And for all the hometown values, small town values, there's things like an open border, giving driver's license to illegals, putting feminine products in male bathrooms. These are the kind of things that don't sit real well in many battleground states such as Georgia, North Carolina, and other places.
Congressman, if you could, talk to us about the importance of Pennsylvania. Obviously, Harris and Walz, ironically, holding their first rally there in Philadelphia, which is also the home state of the incumbent governor, Josh Shapiro, he's expected to attend, front runner up until today, to be that VP choice. How will this, move maybe demonstrate unity to their party and undecided independent voters? But at the same time, could Harris risk losing support from Pennsylvania voters by not choosing Governor Shapiro?
She could. I think it's very likely. But I think here's the difference, and I've heard this said a lot of times. Today was a day in which you found out who Vice President Harris was listening to. Was she listening to the political folks who actually help win and run and win campaigns, or was she listening to the base of her party, which she has been pandering to for a number of years, but Biden and Harris have as well? And the answer came real clear. It came that she was going to pander to the base, and she was going to make this about a left-wing election using a very unknown Minnesota governor who has a lot of political baggage. It's going to come out over the next little bit. Over 70% of the country have no idea who Tim Walz is. The issue here is can Pennsylvania be put in play, which I think it will be. Josh Shapiro is probably going to be there tonight. He'll probably say the right things, but this has to be a blow for him, has to be a blow for some in Pennsylvania who thought this could maybe put this race on the map a little bit in Pennsylvania. So it's just, really give this race till about the 1st of September after you get through what has become almost a month-long Democratic National Convention by proxy because of what's happened with the ouster of Joe Biden and now with Vice President Harris. And then we'll see where this settles out the 1st of September.
Congressman Walz was also the governor there in Minnesota during the George Floyd BLM riots. There was criticism of how that was handled with all of the unrest, himself reportedly acknowledging failures in the response. How might, those events impact him on the ticket?
They're going to be huge. The immigration, look, the questions here is the issues have not changed. Immigration is still out of control at the border. He is an open border governor in Minnesota who believes that he should give driver's license to illegals, who should make payments to illegals. This is a person who is fully in line with the open border concept of Vice President Harris. So, again, that's going to be a problem. It then blows back into the BLM riots in 2020, in which, now there's surfacing, reports of his wife and others let him, and we saw he didn't do anything when Minneapolis was burning. And there's just so many things that are wrong there. When those are going to be vivid images placed in the last 90, 60 days, 30 days of this campaign, do you want a ticket that supports an open border and supports unlawlessness and rioting in our country? It's a pretty shocking move, to be honest.
Former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins, thank you for joining us.
It's always good to be with you, Steve. Take care.
And coming up, what does Governor Walz bring to the table for the Harris campaign? We'll hear from the people about the vice president's choice for her running mate. NTD's Sam Wong was just outside of the White House to hear from voters. That and more when we return. Childhood
poverty in Minnesota by 1/3, making Minnesota the state with the lowest childhood poverty rate in the country.
In the 12 years prior to this, Tim Walz served Minnesota as a congressman. He initially flipped his district seat from red to blue, highlighting perhaps the strongest advantage he brings to the Harris campaign. That is the ability to connect with swing voters. During his time on Capitol Hill, he didn't shy away from opportunities to work with Republicans, most notably on the defense front. He supported funding the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and tighter vetting of refugees entering the U.S. He's a veteran himself, serving in the Army National Guard for 24 years. Similar to Vice President Kamala Harris, he's maintained a consistent stance on China during the course of his political life, from denouncing the Tiananmen Square massacre to supporting freedom in Hong Kong.
Tyranny can only survive if we forget. So I think it's very important to mark this anniversary. It's very important to be standing with the people who know the history, people's desire to have basic religious freedoms, basic freedom of the press, freedom of the speech. I mean, that is what made Hong Kong so dynamic, and I would encourage them to continue to find ways to compromise.
Walz spent time in China, teaching for 1 year in 1989. He describes the Chinese people as, quote, kind, generous, capable people who would thrive under proper leadership, taking a jab at the Chinese communist regime. Walz's foundation is in education. He taught high school students and coached football in Mankato, Minnesota before entering politics. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And so what does Vice President Kamala Harris's new running mate, Governor Tim Walz, bring to their ticket? And what do young voters want to hear from the Democratic candidates? Let's welcome in Josh Lefazet, former Nassau County, New York legislator, the youngest ever elected in that county. Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show.
It's great to have you. Josh, Kamala Harris obviously choosing Tim Walz now as her running mate, citing his nuanced stance on the U.S.-Israel relationship, and yet also his sympathy for pro-Palestinian views. Some on the left flank of the Democratic Party are pleased with this choice, especially given concerns about Shapiro's candidacy due to his Jewish heritage. As a strong advocate for Israel yourself, what are your thoughts on Walz's selection, being the selection, and how do you think the Jewish community will respond?
Sure. So I have concern and I don't have concern. I don't have concern about Tim Walz serving as vice president because, like Josh Shapiro, like Andy Beshear, like Pete Buttigieg, this is somebody who supports Israel, right? The Jewish Democrats of America, Democratic Majority for Israel, all groups that are pro-Israel have been supportive of Tim Walz and understand his Israel bona fides. So I'm not concerned about his service. What I am concerned about, and what I think is vehemently grotesque, has been the anti-Semitic and consistent campaign to defame Josh Shapiro. And I remind your viewers, 8 in 10 American Jews say caring about Israel is important to them being Jewish. A Harvard poll showed that 80% of Americans support Israel. And so I caution all elected officials not to cower to this wake of anti-Semitism from a very vocal minority, unfortunately on the far left, but also on the far right. And to remember that the majority of voters, and especially in these swing states, the majority of these moderate, undecided voters support the state of Israel. The support for the state of Israel never used to be partisan. It cannot be partisan. Supporting Israel is an American value. So again, while I'm not concerned about Tim Walz being in the Situation Room with Kamala Harris, supporting Israel and its right to defend itself, I am concerned about the conversation surrounding Josh Shapiro's potential candidacy. Joe Lieberman was selected in 2000, and nobody brought up the fact that he was Jewish in a pejorative way. It is absolutely outrageous that in the year 2024, because Josh Shapiro was Jewish, that he was singled out with over the top or with latent anti-Semitism.
Now, Josh, just switching gears a bit, as Harris tries to court younger voters, what does she need to speak to and able to appeal to some of the biggest concerns of those young voters, and how is she currently being received in that spectrum?
It's interesting. Kamala Harris has caught fire with young voters, and the trajectory of the race changed on a dime. And what's fascinating, literally the day that Joe Biden decided to not announce that he was running for re-election, you look at statistics here and kind of how they jumped. Biden was +4 with young voters. Kamala Harris, just 2 weeks later, is +20. So young voters are enthused by Kamala Harris's nomination. They believe it, infuses exuberance into the Democratic Party and into a ticket that up to this point was stale. What's really paramount here, and I talk about policy over rhetoric all the time. Young people care about policy and what policies are going to make their lives better and the world better. So they care about a candidate who's going to take bold action to stop climate change, a candidate who wants to end the scourge of gun violence, a candidate who's going to lower the cost of college education and make the American dream of home ownership more available to a generation which has record low percentage of individuals who live on their own in their own home, and record high number of millennials and Gen Z folks who are living with a relative because of the cost of housing. What's interesting about Tim Walz is he's also caught fire. So 2 weeks ago, I bet that his popularity in terms of his name recognition was probably in the low single digits across the country. There has been a social media phenomenon that Tim Walz is this individual that young people really believe is somebody they can get behind. And I think it's based on his record of performance in Minnesota.
Yeah.
You look at somebody who has a record of experience delivering on free school meals, on strengthening abortion access, on gun rights. So young people are enthused and enthralled by him, and I think we're happy today.
Josh LaFazza, former Nassau County legislator, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Congressional leaders reacting to Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz receiving immediate support from Democrats and former colleagues on Capitol Hill. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has more.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer posted on social media this Tuesday morning that Governor of Minnesota Tim Walz was a great choice. Schumer also added that, and I quote, "There is no doubt that the Harris-Walz ticket will lead us to victory in November and build a future Americans can be proud of," end of quote. On the House side, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries also took to social media to show his enthusiasm. According to Jeffries, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will lead America into a brighter future for everyone. More progressive voices on Capitol Hill also took to social media on Tuesday to show their support for Vice President Kamala Harris's vice presidential nominee. Representative Ilhan Omar, the Democrat from Minnesota's 5th District, praised Governor Walz's policies on universal school meals, marijuana legalization, and protection to access to abortions. Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, praised Tim Walz for his background as a school teacher and a strong supporter of labor unions, and that he would be a great asset to the Harris administration.
So excited today. 1 month ago, it looked like Democrats were going to lose in a landslide, probably lose the Senate, not recapture the House. And it was like a funereal culture in Washington. Turn up the clock to now, and it is extraordinary what is going on. And I am excited. Tim Walz is a gentleman, competent, common sense, school teacher, National Guardsman, and someone who just is a decent, outstanding guy.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson also posted on social media and called the Harris-Walz ticket the most radical left-wing ticket in American history. Speaker Johnson also said he looks forward to highlighting the vast differences between their policies and the America First agenda. It's important to note that Governor Tim Walz was a U.S. congressman for 12 years before becoming governor of Minnesota. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Now, we just heard from members of Congress about Harris's pick for vice president, but what do everyday Americans say about the Minnesota governor? NTD's Sam Wong was right outside the White House to hear what the people had to say.
Whatever works. I don't have a strong opinion about one or the other.
My hope was that she would definitely choose Josh Shapiro, but she didn't. So
Minnesota's been pretty Democratic for a while, so I'm not sure he's going to bring in a ton of new voters, but I'll be interested to see more and learn more about what he stands for and what he'll bring to the campaign.
I thought she was going to go with Shapiro, but then I could understand why she would go with Walz.
I actually am from Minnesota. I love Governor Walz. I think it's an awesome pick. I think he's done a lot of great stuff for our state with the free school lunches, legalization.
I think he's probably the right person from the point of view that he's trying to cover all parts of society, really.
He needs to find a better person to pair with if he wants to win this election.
And how do you think he's compared to other potential VP pick in this race, that being Josh Shapiro and others?
Yeah, I think that he is somebody who's proven to work across the aisle, and he is going to be just a wonderful representation of the Midwest.
He's fine. I don't think him and Kamala would work well together. At the end of the day, they differ on a lot of policies.
How do you think he's compared to Trump's VP pick, in this case, J.D. Vance?
J.D. Vance he's a more down-to-earth American person, and he's family-oriented. You know, he's somebody that supports the same values that Trump supports.
He has tremendous experience, both as an educator in the military, as governor of Minnesota in his second term now. There's no comparison. He has so much more experience.
Days until Election Day. Several states still holding primary elections today. NTD's Jason Blair had some key matches to keep an eye on.
Some highlights from Tuesday's primary elections include Missouri, where Democratic Congresswoman Cori Bush is defending her seat against St. Louis prosecutor Wesley Bell. Now, Bell has been a consistent supporter of Israel defending itself in the Israel-Hamas conflict, when Bush has been a critic of Israel's actions. This primary represents a current divide in the Democratic Party over the issue. In New York's primaries, a similar matchup took place between Israel critic Jamal Bowman and pro-Israel candidate George Latimer. Latimer ended up winning that race. In Washington, Republican Representative Dan Newhouse is up against 7 contenders, notably Jared Sessler, who has Trump's endorsement, and former candidate for Senator Tiffany Smiley. Newhouse was one of 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump. In Michigan, Democratic Senator Stabenow has decided against running for a 5th term, creating a heated primary for a spot. And Republicans are seeing this as an opportunity to flip the seat and gain control of the Senate. Jason Blair, NTD News.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, please visit us at ntd.com and download our NTD mobile app. That is all we have for you this evening on the Capitol Report. Thank you so much for watching.